Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, my dear students. Today we are going to do our last lecture of the respiratory pathology, and that is the most important thing that we are going to do. Recently, there is a high rise in the lung carcinomas, and you must have heard that it is because of the smoking, and lots of other environmental factors are responsible for the lung carcinoma. So today our topic is the lung carcinoma. We are going to discuss about the etiology of the lung carcinoma. We are going to discuss the types of lung carcinoma. We are going to discuss its prognosis. We are going to discuss its growth pattern. We are going to describe the staging regarding the lung carcinoma, and also we are going to discuss regarding the pleural carcinomas, in which the most important one is the mesothelioma. So my dear students, lung carcinoma, as I have just told you, is the most frequently diagnosed major cancers in the world and the most important and the common cause of cancer mortality worldwide, and it is because of the cigarette smoke. So you have to remember these 3 or 4 lines. 90 to 95% are the carcinomas. So we are going to talk about squamous cell carcinomas, we are going to talk about adenocarcinomas. 5% are bronchial carcinoid, so they are going to have the features of the carcinoid tumors. You must have taught previously in GIT pathology about the carcinoid tumors, so we are going to discuss again about the carcinoid. 2 to 5% are the mesenchymal in nature, so you can have sarcomas in 2 to 5% of the cases. So cancers of lung occurs between the ages of 40 to 70 years, so 4th and 7th decade of life, with the rise in incidence in 5th and 6th decade, and only 2% of the cases are going to appear before the 40 years of the age. So your first university question regarding to today's lecture is how you are going to classify lung carcinoma. So as I have told you that majority cases, 90 to 95% of the cases are carcinomas. So in carcinomas we are going to have squamous cell carcinoma, small cell carcinoma, the most important one, adenocarcinoma, in which we are going to describe its pattern: acinar, papillary, bronchoalveolar, solid, mixed. Please do remember these things, because many of the times you have been asked that you have to tell the variants of the adenocarcinoma. Then large cell carcinoma, large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma, adenosquamous, which is the combination of the adenocarcinoma and the squamous cell carcinoma. Then carcinomas with pleomorphic components like sarcomatoid components or other things. So it's a mixture of the carcinoma with the mesenchymal components. So then carcinoid tumors, which we have just discussed, that 5% of the cases can be carcinoid, and carcinoids could be typical or atypical. Then carcinomas of the salivary glands, and then the last ones are the unclassified carcinomas. So as far as etiology and pathogenesis is concerned, I have just told you that the most important etiological factor is the tobacco smoke, and if we are going to talk about the environmental, then industrial hazards, air pollution, and if we are going to talk about the molecular genetics, then we are going to discuss RAS and other factors in detail with the lung carcinomas. So my dear students, just remember this thing: tobacco smoke or cigarette smoke has a very strong association with the carcinomas of the mouth, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, pancreas, kidney, and the urinary bladder. In kidney and urinary bladder, I've taught you that this tobacco smoke plays a very important role. So 87% of the lung carcinomas are going to occur in the people who have been active smokers, or they have just stopped the smoking. And recently it has been observed that not only the active smokers are going to have this carcinomas, but also passive smokers are at higher risk of getting the lung carcinoma. So the most important lung carcinomas that are associated with tobacco smokes are squamous cell carcinoma and the small cell carcinoma. This is your university question, and you have been asked that which type of carcinoma is mostly occur with the tobacco smoke. So what this tobacco smoke is going to do? So just remember that benzopyrene in this are going to cause the molecular fingerprinting in the form of guanine, cytosine are going to be more, while thymine adenosine mutations will be less in p53 gene that are probably caused by the benzopyrene in the smoke. So in the cigarette smoke, along with the benzopyrene, we are having 1200 substances in which we are having the initiators like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, benzopyrenes that we have just discussed. We have promoters. So as you know that you need to have initiators in the first thing, and then you need to have a promoters to cause the carcinoma. So in a lung smoke, you are both having the initiator components and you are going to have the promoter component. So lung carcinomas can proceed at a very high rate. So then in the cigarette smoke, we can have radioactive elements like polonium, carbon 14 and potassium, and the most lethal thing in other than the benzopyrenes are the contaminants like arsenic, like nickels, like moles, and this is going to aggravate the rates of the getting the carcinoma. So if we are going to do the clinical subgrouping of the carcinoma, once we are having this is very important classification, just remember this thing, you are going to tell me about the clinical subgroups of the carcinomas. So today your assignment is you have to tell me about the clinical subgroups of the carcinoma. One is small cell carcinoma and other one is non-small cell carcinoma. And why we have divided it like this? Because small cell carcinomas in the clinical settings are going to show you the metastasis and they are going to be high initial response to the chemotherapy. First thing is that. But non-small cell carcinomas are less often metastatic and they are not going to go very well responsive with the chemotherapy, so they are less responsive. So this is your clinical differentiation. As far as your molecular differentiation is concerned, in your small cell carcinoma, the most important molecular mutations that you are going to see is at the c-KIT levels. We are having MYCL and MYCN, P53, 3P levels, RB and BCL2, while in small cell it is on the EGFR, KRAS, P53, P16, INK4. As you all know, these are the inhibitors of the INK family, then LKB1 and P10. So the genetic mutations in both of these categories is also very different, and the only similarity in both of these groups is only of P53. But as you know that P53 is a guardian of the genome gene, so it has to be present in most of the carcinomas to get mutated for the development of the carcinoma. So what is going to happen whenever there is a mutation? As you know from your previous knowledge of the neoplasia, that whenever there is a problem, there are signal transduction molecules that are going to be activated by AKT pathways or STAT pathways, and they are going to activate or they are going to progress in the cell division and rapidly going into the mitosis. And there is another effect that is going to be called as field effect, and in the field effect we are having a loss at the chromosome 3p levels, and there are large areas of the respiratory mucosas which are going to be mutagenized after the exposure of the carcinogenesis. And other thing that is very important in the lung carcinoma is that there is a familial clustering. In our first slide I have told you that there is a familial element or there is a genetic element regarding this is also involved, and as far as familial clustering is involved, there is a polymorphisms at the cytochrome P450 levels, and this can be seen in the peripheral blood lymphocytes, because in the peripheral blood lymphocyte there is a chromosomal breakage after the exposure of the tobacco smokes. And there is also another thing that we can see along with this P450 gene. There is an autosomal susceptibility locus at the 6th chromosome at the long arm of the 23-25, and there can be also polymorphism in the nicotine acetylcholine receptors at the chromosome 15 at the long arm 25. Then comes etiology and pathogenesis. So non-smokers, women's, EGFR, epithelial growth factors mutations, and adenocarcinomas are the new ones that has been developed. And I have to talk to you about that non-smokers who are the passive smokers, and in women they are using the filters So these are at the high risk also. So we have to see that this EGFR mutations are very, very important in the cases of non-smokers. So as far as we are concerned that how this carcinoma is going to occur, the most important thing is the precursor lesions. And as you know that the precursor lesions in squamous cell carcinoma will be squamous dysplasia or carcinoma in situ. In adenocarcinoma, it could be atypical adenomatous hyperplasia, and in carcinoid tumors, it is diffuse idiopathic pulmonary neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia. And you know this hyperplasia, whether it is in atypical adenomatous hyperplasia, in the carcinoid neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia, or in any other thing, hyperplasia is a double-edged sword. So it plays a very important role in the development of the carcinomas. Here you can see the lung carcinoma. This hole is showing you the grayish white hemorrhagic necrosis area of the lung carcinoma, and this is in the hilar region. This is your main bronchus that is going to go in this area. So the spread will be very rapidly goes into this main bronchus. Here you can see there is another involvement at this area. So this is the lung carcinoma's picture. If we are going to go for the squamous cell carcinoma, this is the most important category, as we have just talked about it, that more than more cases are of squamous cell carcinoma. So the pre-malignant condition is the squamous metaplasia or dysplasia is there, which is going to transform into the carcinoma in situ, and these atypical cells can be seen in the cytological smears of the sputum or bronchoalveolar lavages or brushings. If you can see here in this diagram, this is your very much normal epithelium, and this is having a cilias, but after some times there is a progression that there will be the no cilia. So there is a loss of the cilia, and as you can see there is a very good orientation. There is these are your basal cells and these are your elongated cells which are at the upper surface, but here you are going to lose this organization pattern. So disorientation is there. If you are going to see here, now your ciliated columnar epithelium which are on your top are replaced with the squamous cells. Here you can see these are your all squamous cells. So this is your squamous metaplasia. So their picture is we are having the squamous metaplasia, and if you are going to go from here to there, here there's a very drastic picture. Here you can see that there are mutations, and these are your showing the totally malignant cells, but still these all malignant cells are there within this basement membrane. So this is your carcinoma in situ. And here in the last picture, if you are going to see here, this carcinoma in situ has been gone underneath the basement membrane, so it becomes an invasive. Here you can see polymorphic cells, hyperplastic with the NC ratio disturbance, with hyperchromasias is there. And if you can see here, there are lots of mitotic figures can be seen in this picture. So from the normal columnar ciliated epithelium or respiratory epithelium, there is a transition towards the squamous metaplasia. From squamous metaplasia, we are having the carcinoma in situ, and carcinoma in situ is going to progress towards the invasive carcinoma. In the bronchiolar lavages or in the sputum, you can see this squamous cell carcinoma which is having a disturbed NC ratio, and here you can see double nucleus, or bifurcation of the nucleus is also there. Here again totally a disturbed cell. So in the bronchoalveolar lavage you can see these types of cells in the squamous cell carcinoma. In squamous cell carcinoma, it can extend to the pleural surface within the pleural cavity or in the pericardium. Then it can spread. I've just shown you that if it is arising at the area where there is a main bronchus, it can spread directly from the bronchus to the trachea and mediastinal lymph nodes. Then as it is carcinoma, then it is going to form the lymphatic spread, but as lung is very vascular element, so hematogenous spread is also there. In more than half of the cases, if we are going to talk about organ metastasis, adrenals are going to be involved. Then the second most highest are the livers. Then the brain metastasis and the bone metastasis are the additional metastatic sites. Squamous cell carcinoma tumor is going to be characterized by the presence of the keratinization of intracellular bridges, and this keratinization could be in the form of the squamous pulse that you can see here, or it can be individual cell keratinization. Then there is a genetic mutation at the level of P53, RB, P16E, INC4 at the chromosome 3, 9, 17, EGFR or HER2/neu. If you're going to see here, these are your keratin pulse, larger keratin pulse here. These are your malignant squamous cells, and if you are going to see on the electron microscopy, you can see the intracellular bridges there. So these are your invasiveness of the squamous cell carcinomas which are invading underneath. So this is your keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma. Now we are going to talk about adenocarcinomas. This is the second most prevalent type in the non-small cell, and the adenocarcinoma, as you all know, are going to show you the glandular differentiation, and sometimes there is a mucin production by them. As I have told you about the variants of the adenocarcinoma, this is your second assignment for today, and you have to tell me about the variants of the adenocarcinoma. So this is also a UQ and very important UQ. You just have to tell me this thing. As far as your variants of the adenocarcinomas are concerned, the most common one are the acinar shape, then the papillary one, and the bronchoalveolar. Just remember this thing, that this bronchoalveolar is going to have a very good prognosis, and it is showing you the lipidic growth. We are going to discuss it within few minutes. And one is followed with the mucin formation. If you are going to see here, these are very good form of the glands formation. Here you can see this is a gland formation. Here you can see this is a gland formation. Again, these are your gland formations, and these glands are sharing the walls. They are not maintaining the integrity of their walls, and here they are going to totally coalesce together, and they are showing you the almost the solid pattern. And if you can see here, the lining cells are showing you the highly pleomorphic pictures, and with the high mitotic figures. Here again you can see the mitotic figures again, and so these are your highly pleomorphic cells. As far as mutations are concerned, the most important one are the KRAS mutations, and they are going to show you the worst prognosis and resistance to the EGFR inhibitors in the chemotherapy. Then there are the P53 mutations, RB1 mutation. This is also a very important university question. You are always been asked that you have to write down at least 3 to 4 genetic mutations in the adenocarcinoma and also in the squamous cell carcinoma. So you have to remember these things. RB1 genetic mutation, P16 mutation, EGFR, and this EGFR mutation is a very new one and epidermal growth factor, and this is mostly seen, as I've told you, in the women, non-smokers, and or of the Asian region, and this is very at the high rise nowadays. Then there could be a CMAT that can be amplified, and also it could be a mutated one. We have just talked about the bronchoalveolar, which is going to show you the very good prognosis, and in the picture it is showing you the peripheral portion of the lung is going to be affected in a single node, or sometimes it could be a multiple diffuse nodules which are going to coalesce together, and it is going to present with the pneumonia like consolidation. And the most important feature is a lipidic growth pattern. As you know that you must have seen the leaves which are growing along with the walls, so the same pattern is going to be followed with this bronchoalveolar, and this is not going to destruct this your alveolar pattern, so it is going to go along this alveoli wall, not destructing it. So here is a very good picture. This is your alveolar wall, if you can see here, and along with that you are going to have a lipidic growth, and these are your mucinous cells. And if you can see here, these are like papilla like patterns, but actually this is a lipidic growth. Now we are going to talk about adenoma carcinoma sequence. Adenocarcinoma of the lungs are going to arise, as I have told you, from the atypical adenomatous hyperplasia, which are going to progress to the bronchoalveolar. This is your bronchoalveolar, this is your normal lung, and this is your bronchoalveolar pattern. So types of the adenocarcinoma, which I have just talked about it, about the variants. One is the mucinous ones, and the other ones are the non-mucinous ones. In the mucinous ones, we have a tall columnar cells with the intracytoplasmic or intraalveolar mucins, and these are going to spread erogenously, forming satellite tumors, while the non-mucinous ones have columnar puck-shaped cells or cuboidal cells, and they are going to have a peripheral lung nodules, and they rarely have a erogenous spread. Now we are going to start with the small cell carcinoma, and I have talked to you that this small cell carcinoma have a very distinct type of the mutations, and the clinical behavior is very different from the non-small cell carcinoma, being it is going to respond very well to the chemotherapy in the initial phases, but metastasis is very high. So in small cell carcinoma, as its name shows, that there are small cells with a scanty cytoplasm, but they are having the ill-defined borders, finely granular nuclear chromatin, which is going to called as salt and pepper chromatin, and there is absent or inconspicuous nuclei, but nuclear molding is going to be present. So we are going to have a cell in which you are having a very scanty type of cytoplasm, and nuclear molding can be seen in the nuclei. Mitotic count is very high in these tumors. Necrosis is very common and expensive, and we are going to have this azoparty effect. This is very important. In your university questions, you have been asked in the small cell carcinoma about the azoparty effect, and this is also an important question of your practical exam also. So in the azoparty effect, what is going to happen, that these small cells are going to lose, there is an incrustation of the DNA from this necrotic tumor cells, and there will be this is going to go into the vessel wall, and there will be the basophilic straining of the vessel wall. Here you can see this is your azoparty effect, because there is a DNA is going to be extruded out, and this is going into the vessel. So this whole vessel is going to show the basophilic straining because of the DNA. If you are going to see here, these are your small cells showing you the almost no cytoplasm, and if you can see here, there is a nuclear molding. This is your nuclear molding, and there is a high mitotic figure in this picture. If you can see here, there is a very high mitotic figure. So the small cell carcinoma are going to show you the markers for the neuroendocrine markers, as I've just talked about, that these small cells are going to show you the pattern of the salt and pepper pattern. So this salt and pepper pattern is because of the synaptophysin, chromogranin, and other granules like parathormones, like hormones, and CD57. And these are when we are going to immunostrain with the chromogranin and synaptophysin in small cell carcinoma, these will be positive. Then there will be the most important mutation that are happening in the small cell carcinomas are the P53 and the RB1, which are your tumor suppressor genes and the guardians of the genome gene. Then immunohistochemistry demonstrates high levels of the anti-apoptotic BCL2 in 90% of the tumor. So these three things are very important in the etiology of the small cell carcinoma. Now we are going to do the large cell carcinoma. As its name shows, that against the small cell, there will be the larger cells. These are your undifferentiated malignant epithelial tumor cells, and sometimes they are going to lack the features of the small cell carcinoma, and also you are not having any features of the glandular tumors or the squamous cell. So it is a totally very large type of cell. If you can see here, very large type of cells, and there is no mucin, there is no glandular formation, and there are no squamous cells here. So they are large cells which are interspread into the parenchyma. If we are going to talk about the secondary pathology which these carcinomas are going to cause, as wherever there is a carcinoma, there can be an obstruction, and I have told you whenever there is a partial obstruction, there could be an emphysema, we have told about. But if there is a total obstruction, there could be an atelectasis at that site. So there will be because there is an obstruction, so there will be the impaired drainage. Whenever there is a stasis, there is an inflammation, so we can have a suppurative or ulcerative bronchitis or bronchiectasis. Then we could have pulmonary abscesses, superior vena cava syndrome, pleuritis, pericarditis, along with the extensions. As far as we are talking about the international staging system, as you all know, that is the TNM staging system. This is also your important university question. As you know, T0 is for no evidence of the pulmonary for the primary tumor. This T1 is very important. TIS is always stand for the carcinoma in situ. If the tumor size is 3 centimeter or more than 3 centimeter, then it is T1. If tumor is having the more than 3 centimeter in dimension and is going to involve the main bronchus, then it is the T2. If the tumor size is whether 3 centimeter or less than 3 centimeter, but it is involving the diaphragm, mediastinal pleura, and the parietal pericardium tumor or the main bronchus, and it is less than 2 centimeter distal to the cornea, but without the involvement of the crania, then associated atelectasis is there, then it is always T3, whatever the size is. But if there is an involvement of the diaphragm, just remember this thing, or the mediastinal pleura, then it is T3. Tumor of any size, but it is going to involve the mediastinum, heart, greater vessels, trachea, vertebral bodies, and there will be pleural or pericardial effusion along with that, then it is going to under the heading of T4. As far as nodal metastasis is concerned, N1 is also always go for the ipsilateral peribronchial ipsilateral hilar lymph nodes, while N2 is going for the metastasis to the ipsilateral or the subcranial lymph nodes, while metastasis to the contralateral or opposite sides related to the N3, while distant metastasis, if it is there, then it is M1. So just remember this thing. So as far as stages are concerned, in our stage 1A and 1B, we have T1 and T2 along with the no nodal metastasis and no organ metastasis, while in stage 2 we are having the ipsilateral metastasis in the nodal region, and it could be from T1 to T3, while in stage 3 we are having any thing like T3 to T4, but nodal metastasis from N1 can go into the N3, so contralateral lymph nodes involvement is there. But here you can see that in all these stages from stage 1 to stage 3, you are not going to have a distant metastasis, but we are going to call it stage 4, whether it is any T1, T2, T3, or it is N1, N2, but if there is a distant metastasis, then it is stage 4. So just remember this thing. This is very important. So local effects of the lung tumor are very important, and these are going to cause the pneumonias. These are going to cause the lipoid pneumonias because of the tumor obstruction, and there is a accumulation of the cellular lipids or the macrophages. Then there could be pleural effusion. If there is involvement of the recurrent laryngeal nerve, then this is going to cause the hoarseness. If esophagus is going to be involved, then there is a dysphagia. If there is a phrenic nerve invasion, then there will be a paralysis of the diaphragm. If chest wall invasion is there, then there will be the rib destruction. Superior vena cava compression is going to cause the superior vena cava syndrome. Sympathetic ganglia invasion is going to cause the Horner syndrome. This is very important. You have been asked about the Horner syndrome many of the times in your university question. So your third assignment for today is that you have to tell me about the Horner syndrome. Then there will be the if there is a pericardial involvement, then there could be a pericarditis or pericardial tamponade leading to the heart failure. If we are going to talk about the paraneoplastic syndrome, this is your very important university question. Just remember this thing. You have done this thing in your third year also in your neoplasia chapter, so nothing is new to you. There could be a paraneoplastic syndrome because of the secretion of the ADH-like syndrome, and it is going to induce the hyponatremia. Then there could be a secretion of the ACTH, which is going to produce the Cushing syndrome. Parathormone or parathyroid-like hormones or prostaglandins. Then there will be the hypercalcemia. If there is a secretion of the calcitonin, then it is going to cause the hypocalcemia. Gynecomastia can be there because of the gonadotrophin, and carcinoid syndrome could be there because of the serotonin and the bradykinin syndrome. Along with that, we also have Lambert-Eaton syndrome, peripheral neuropathies, dermatological like acanthosis nigricans. We have talked about acanthosis nigricans, leukomyid reaction, in which we are going to have a high rise in the TLC, hypertrophic pulmonary osteopathy, in which there is an involvement of the lungs and the joints. Then Horner syndrome. This Horner syndrome is very, very important. This is your assignment for today. Also, just remember this thing: in Horner syndrome, we are having the ptosis, meiosis, and ophthalmosis on the same side of the liver, and mainly this is going to happen with the Pankot's tumor, which are located at the apex of the lungs. So remember this thing: in the apex of the lungs, these are called as Pankot's tumor, and they are going to cause the Horner syndrome. So now the second last most important tumor is the carcinoid tumors, and we have talked about that 1 to 5% of all the lung tumors are the carcinoid tumors. These are can be seen younger than the 40 years of the age, which are on only 2% of the cases. Incidence is equal for both cases, and patients are, the most important thing is that 40% patients are non-smokers. And if we are going to talk about the mutation, there is a loss of heterozygosity or LOH at chromosome 3, 13, and 9 and 5 chromosome. Carcinoid tumors could be typical carcinoid tumors, or these could be atypical. And normally these are low-grade malignant epithelial tumors. Here you can see this is a carcinoid, very well delimited here, but here you can't see the margin. So a very glistening type of appearance. Here you can see these are forming the nests. So these are your nest formations, and here you can see that in these nests you are going to have cells which are rounded in appearance and having a salt and pepper like cytoplasm, and NC ratio is very good. Here you can see that and nuclei can be seen here. If we are going to talk about the classification of the carcinoid tumors and what is the difference between typical and atypical, in typical there is no p53 mutation, but in atypical there are mutations in the p53, BCL2, anti-apoptotic one, and the BAX expression. In typical one, we are going to have only few mitosis per 10 higher power fields, but if the mitoses are more than 2 to 10 per high power field, then it is going to fall in the atypical. There is a lack of necrosis in the typical one, but there is a foci of necrosis in the atypical one, and there is increased pleomorphism and nucleoli growths which are going to involve the lymphatics. Now the most important one is the mesothelioma. This is also very important, as recently there is a very uprise in the mesothelioma cases, and these are related with the industry in which we are using the asbestos. So in the normally in the coastal areas where there is a shipping industry in United States and Great Britain, 90% of the reported mesotheliomas are asbestos related, and if you are going to have a lifetime risk of developing mesothelioma in an asbestos exposure is 7 to 10%, which is very high. So no increase in the risk of the mesothelioma in asbestos who smoke. This is in contrast to the risk of the asbestos related lung carcinoma already, which is very high. So if you are having the lung carcinoma then and you are also a smoker, then there is a risk of developing a lung carcinoma. So this is totally a different scenario. If we are going to talk about malignant mesothelioma, as you know that it is because of the asbestos, and in asbestosis we have talked about asbestos bodies like ferruginous bodies, dome shaped. I have shown you these pictures, and there could be asbestos plaques. There's a deletions in the chromosome 1, 3, 6, 9, 22 and p16. There's a low frequency of p53 mutation, and p53 mutation can be seen in the atypical varieties mainly, and 70% of the malignant mesotheliomas. SV40 or simian virus 40 viral DNA sequences are seen in 60 to 80% of the pleural malignant mesothelioma. Here you can see all the areas is flooded with the pleural type of lesions, and this is your whitish, grayish white. Necrotic area is there, necrotic hemorrhagic area again is there, and this is a very nodular type of appearance showing you the malignant mesothelioma. So the important university question is how you are going to differ the adenocarcinoma from the mesothelioma, as both of these are going to present in a glandular pattern. So mesothelioma includes the positive staining for the acid mucopolysaccharidases. These are going to show you the lock of staining for the CEA and the other epithelia which is going to be expressed by the adenocarcinoma. So adenocarcinomas are going to show you the staining with the CEA, and if you know this, This carcinoembryonic is also positive in their intestinal tumors, colorectal carcinomas. But mesothelioma is positive for the acid mucopolysaccharides. There is a strong staining for keratin proteins in the adenocarcinomas with the perinuclear rather than the peripheral staining, which this peripheral staining is mainly seen in the adenocarcinoma. There is a positive staining for calretinin, WT1, cytokeratin, and D40 in the mesothelioma. On the most important thing, that if we are going to go for the electron microscopy, there is a presence of the long microvilli and abundant tonofilaments, but absent microvillous lamellar bodies. So this is your mesothelioma, like which are again forming a glandular like pattern, and sometimes this is a bigger gland which is remain coalesced together. And here you can see the cells are very much similar to the adenocarcinoma. So you need to have but normally we are having very pleomorphic picture also, so you need to have immunohistochemistry for this. So for differentiation, we have acid mucopolysaccharides. CEA staining is compulsory for this. And here you can see this is the immunohistochemistry which is showing you the positivity for with the acid mucopolysaccharides in the this, and this is your electron microscopy which is showing you the microtonal filaments in this area, and there are no lamellar bodies in the mesothelioma. And this is your last picture, and this is your assignment for today. You have to tell me what type of carcinoma is there in this lung. I'm going to tell you one thing, that this is the metastatic one. So success comes to those who make it happen. This is our last lecture for the respiratory epithelium, and I hope so that when you are going to come to the college, you will be fully prepared. Best of luck, my dear.